your Chihuahua did something today that you probably ignored. Again, they stopped what they were doing. They became completely still. And they stared at you, not at your hands, not at the food bowl, not at the door, at you for a few seconds, maybe longer. And because there was no barking, no whining, no obvious demand, you assumed nothing important was happening. But what if that silent stare was actually one of the most important conversations your dog ever tries to have with you? What if the behavior that seems the easiest to dismiss is the one carrying the deepest message? Many Chihuahua owners describe the same strange moment. Their dog suddenly freezes. The room is quiet. Nothing unusual is happening. Yet those small eyes become completely focused, watching, waiting, studying, almost as if they are trying to understand something invisible. For some owners, it feels sweet. For others, it feels slightly unsettling. Why does my Chihuahua keep staring at me? What are they looking for? What are they thinking? And perhaps the most important question of all, why do they sometimes seem unable to look away? The answer begins with a surprising truth. Your Chihuahua was never designed to spend their life chasing sheep. They were not bred to pull sleds. They were not developed to guard castles or hunt dangerous prey. For centuries, Chihuahuas evolved alongside humans as companions. Not workers, not soldiers. Companions. And that single fact changed the way their brains learned to see the world. While many dogs focus on their environment, a Chihuahua often focuses on the person inside it. Behavioral researchers have discovered something remarkable about domestic dogs. Unlike their wild ancestors, dogs actively seek human eye contact. Not because they are challenging us, not because they are trying to dominate us. Modern canine behavioral science has repeatedly challenged outdated dominance myths. Instead, dogs use eye contact as a social bridge, a way to gather information, a way to feel connected, a way to maintain trust. And few breeds have refined that skill more deeply than the Chihuahua. Because in their world, you are not just part of the environment, you are the center of it. The place where safety lives, the place where comfort begins, the place where uncertainty ends. That means when your Chihuahua freezes and stares at you, they may not be doing nothing at all. They may be doing one of the most important jobs they know. Watching the person they trust most, trying to understand what happens next, trying to stay connected, trying to stay close. If your Chihuahua has ever sat quietly across the room and simply watched you for no apparent reason, comment the number 1 below. You may discover that thousands of other owners have experienced the exact same mysterious moment. And before this video ends, you may never look at that stare the same way again. Because hidden behind those eyes is a biological secret, one that scientists compare to the bond between a parent and a child. A secret that explains why your Chihuahua sometimes seems to watch you as if their entire world depends on it. And in many ways,
it does.
That biological secret begins with a hormone so powerful that it helps create the bond between a mother and her newborn child. A hormone scientists often call the love hormone. Its name is oxytocin. And what researchers discovered about dogs changed the way we understand our relationship with them forever. For years, scientists wondered why dogs seem so emotionally connected to humans. Why do they seek us out? Why do they watch us so closely? Why do they appear to crave eye contact in a way that wolves rarely do? Then researchers observed something extraordinary. When a dog and their owner share a calm, mutual gaze, oxytocin levels rise inside both of them. Not just the human, the dog as well. In other words,
something biological is happening during those quiet moments when your Chihuahua simply looks into your eyes.
Their stare is not empty. Their stare is active. It is communication. It is connection. It is bonding. According to behavioral research, this mutual gaze creates a feedback loop. The dog looks at you. Your brain releases oxytocin. You feel warmth, affection, a desire to respond. Maybe you smile. Maybe you reach down and stroke their head. Maybe you softly say their name. And then something happens inside your Chihuahua. Their oxytocin rises too. They feel safer, more secure, more connected, which encourages them to seek that connection again and again and again. A silent cycle of trust begins to grow. No words, no commands, no treats. Just two species communicating through a glance. Many Chihuahua owners believe their dog is staring because they want something. Food, attention, a walk. And sometimes that is true. But often, the reward your Chihuahua is seeking is much simpler. Your face, your presence, your reassurance that the bond is still there. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you looked up from your chair only to find your Chihuahua already looking at you? Not moving, not asking, just watching. Almost as if they were checking whether you were still there. Almost as if seeing you was enough. Behavioral studies have even identified differences between dogs that briefly glance at their owners and dogs that maintain longer periods of eye contact. The dogs that engage in longer gazes often trigger stronger oxytocin responses. And companion breeds like Chihuahuas are especially known for forming intense human-focused attachments. This helps explain why your Chihuahua can seem almost magnetically drawn to your face, why they follow your eyes, why they monitor your expressions, why they sometimes stare with a softness that feels surprisingly human. Because in that moment, they are not merely seeing you, they are connecting with you. And if you've ever felt that strange sensation that your Chihuahua was looking deeper than your appearance, you may not be imagining it, because the emotional bond between dogs and humans was never built only through touch. Sometimes it is built through a look that says, I know you're there, I feel safe, I trust you. If this sounds like your Chihuahua, comment the number 1 below, because the next secret may explain something even more surprising. Your Chihuahua may not just be staring at you because they love you. They may be staring because, in their mind, watching you is their most important responsibility. That idea may sound strange at first. How could watching a person become a dog's job? But to understand your Chihuahua's stare, you first have to understand what they were bred to do. Many dogs were developed for specific tasks. Border collies watched sheep. Retrievers watched birds. Guard dogs watched strangers. Their eyes were trained toward the world around them. But Chihuahuas followed a different path. For generations, they were valued for something entirely different. Their ability to stay close to people. Their ability to bond. Their ability to live side by side with human beings. And over time, that changed what they paid attention to. While other breeds often scan the environment for movement, prey, or potential threats, a Chihuahua often scans the person they love most. Behavioral experts sometimes describe this as social monitoring. Your dog is constantly gathering information. Not because they are anxious, not because they are trying to control you, and certainly not because they are attempting to dominate you. According to modern canine behavioral sciences, the old dominance theory has been largely abandoned when explaining normal companion dog behavior. As wolf researcher L. David Meck himself later clarified, healthy social relationships are far more complex than simplistic ideas about alpha, control. Your Chihuahua is not staring because they want power over you. They are staring because they care about what happens next. Every movement matters. You stand up, they notice. You sigh, they notice. You walk toward another room, they notice. You reach for your keys, they notice. You pick up a blanket, they notice. You don't even realize how much information you're broadcasting throughout the day. But your Chihuahua notices almost all of it because you are the most important source of information in their world. Researchers have found that dogs are remarkably skilled at reading human social cues. They study facial expressions, body posture, voice tone, direction of gaze, even subtle changes in movement. And Chihuahuas often become masters of this skill. Have you ever noticed your Chihuahua looking at your face before making a decision? Before approaching a stranger? Before entering a new room? Before reacting to an unfamiliar sound? That is not coincidence. That is communication. They are reading their social map. And on that map, you are the biggest landmark, the most reliable reference point, the one thing they trust to help them understand what is happening. This is why many Chihuahua owners feel as though their dog is always watching them. Because in a very real sense, they are. Not with suspicion, not with judgment, but with attention. The same way a devoted assistant watches for instructions. The same way a child looks toward a trusted parent. The same way someone watches the person they depend on most. And perhaps that is the part many owners never realize. Your Chihuahua is not merely living beside you. They are studying you, learning you, memorizing you. your routines, your habits, your moods, your expressions. The sound of your footsteps, the way you move when you're happy, the way you move when you're tired, the way you move when something is wrong. Because the better they understand you, the safer they feel. And that brings us to an even deeper reason behind the stare. One rooted not only in love, but in survival. Because for a creature as small as a Chihuahua, the world can sometimes feel like a very large and uncertain place. And when that happens, there is one thing they instinctively search for: your face. To understand this next reason, imagine experiencing the world from just a few inches above the ground. Every footstep sounds louder. Every unfamiliar noise feels closer. Every sudden movement seems bigger. Now imagine weighing only a few pounds, small enough to be picked up with one arm, small enough that many things in the world can feel overwhelming. This is the reality many Chihuahuas live with every day, and it helps explain why they sometimes freeze and stare directly at you. Because not every stare is about affection. Sometimes it is about reassurance. Behavioral researchers use a term called social referencing. It describes what happens when an individual looks to someone they trust in order to determine whether a situation is safe. Human children do it, and dogs do it too. When something unfamiliar appears in the environment, many dogs instinctively check their owner's reaction before deciding how to respond. A strange sound outside, a visitor at the door, thunder in the distance, an unfamiliar object in the living room. The Chihuahua notices it, but before reacting, they often look at you. They are asking a silent question. Should I be worried? Is everything okay? And your answer may come without a single word. If you remain calm, your Chihuahua often relaxes. If you appear tense, they may become alert. If you suddenly stand up and rush toward a window, they immediately understand that something may require attention. In other words,
your emotions help shape
their understanding of the world. That tiny stare is often an attempt to borrow your confidence, to borrow your sense of safety, to borrow your calm. According to canine behavior experts, this response is especially common in dogs that share strong attachment bonds with their owners. And few breeds form those bonds as intensely as Chihuahuas, because when the world feels uncertain, they know exactly where to look. Think about the last time your Chihuahua stared at you during a thunderstorm, or while guests entered the house, or after hearing an unfamiliar sound in the middle of the night. Perhaps they weren't being nervous. Perhaps they were being smart, gathering information, checking with their trusted guide, making sure the person they depend on wasn't afraid. This is where many owners misunderstand the behavior. They assume the Chihuahua is acting clingy, needy, overly dependent. But from the dog's perspective, something very different may be happening. They are following an ancient survival strategy. Find safety, stay close to safety, monitor safety. And for many Chihuahuas,
safety has a face.
Your face, the person who feeds them, protects them, comforts them. The person whose voice can calm a racing heart in seconds. The person whose presence can transform a frightening moment into an ordinary one. That is why some Chihuahuas seem unable to stop watching their owners. Not because they are weak, not because they lack confidence, but because they have learned something through thousands of shared moments. When you are calm, the world feels manageable. When you are near, life feels safer. And yet, for some Chihuahuas, especially as they grow older, the stare begins to mean something even deeper. Not simply love, not simply reassurance, but a quiet search for orientation itself. Because there may come a time when their eyes see less clearly, their ears hear less sharply, and the person they once watched for comfort becomes the anchor that helps them navigate an increasingly confusing world. There is a moment that arrives in almost every long relationship, a moment so gradual that we often fail to notice it happening. The hair turns a little grayer, the steps become a little slower, the naps become a little longer, and the eyes begin to change. Many Chihuahua owners notice that as their dog grows older, the staring seems to increase. At first, it looks familiar. The same loving gaze, the same quiet attention, the same habit of watching from across the room. But sometimes, something deeper is taking place, because aging changes the way a dog experiences the world. Just as humans may need brighter lights or stronger glasses over time, Senior dogs can experience gradual declines in vision and hearing. The world that once felt predictable can begin to feel less certain, less clear, less reliable. And when that happens, many dogs instinctively seek an anchor, a point of reference, something familiar that helps them stay oriented. For countless senior Chihuahuas, that anchor becomes you. Behavioral experts have observed that older dogs often rely more heavily on visual contact with trusted caregivers. When other senses become less dependable, the human they trust becomes their guide, their constant, their reassurance that everything is still okay. This means that a stare from an older Chihuahua may sometimes carry a different message than it did years ago. Not, pay attention to me, but rather, help me understand where I am, help me feel secure. Help me stay connected. Imagine waking up in a world that slowly becomes harder to interpret. Sounds are quieter, shapes are blurrier, distances are more difficult to judge. Naturally, you would seek out the thing you trust most. For many aging Chihuahuas, that trusted thing is not a place. It is not a toy. It is not even their bed. It is you, your voice, your scent, your face. The familiar presence that's remained constant throughout their life. And this is where the stare can become incredibly moving, because what appears to be simple observation may actually be devotion mixed with vulnerability, a quiet request for guidance, a gentle confirmation that they are not facing the world alone. Of course, there is another important reason owners should pay attention to sudden or unusual staring in senior dogs. According to veterinary behavior specialists, persistent staring into space, staring at walls, appearing lost in familiar rooms, or freezing in confusion can sometimes be associated with canine cognitive dysfunction, often called CCD. Sometimes compared to age-related cognitive decline in humans, CCD can affect a dog's memory, awareness, and ability to navigate familiar environments. This is why context matters. A soft stare directed towards you is often very different from a confused stare directed toward a wall. One may reflect connection. The other may signal disorientation. Neither should be ignored. And if sudden behavioral changes appear, consulting a veterinarian is always the best course of action. But for many healthy senior Chihuahuas,
The truth is far simpler.
as the world grows less certain, you become more important. As their senses gradually change, your presence becomes more valuable. As their confidence in the environment decreases,
Their confidence in you often grows stronger than ever.
perhaps that is one of the most beautiful parts of growing old together. When they were young, they watched you because they were curious. When they became adults, they watched you because they trusted you. But in their later years, they may watch you because you have become their compass. The familiar face that still makes sense when everything else feels a little harder to understand. And if that realization touches your heart, the final message hidden behind your Chihuahua's stare may touch it even more. Because after everything we've learned, the question is no longer why they stare. The real question is what they have been trying to say all along. So now we return to the question that started everything. Why does your Chihuahua freeze and stare at you? After all the science, after all the research, after all the behavioral explanations, the answer may be far simpler than most people imagine. Because the stare was never just a stare, it was a message. A message spoke in the language dogs understand best. A language without words, without sentences, without explanations, a language made of trust, attention, safety, and love. Throughout this video, we've uncovered several reasons behind that silent gaze. Sometimes your Chihuahua is strengthening a biological bond through the oxytocin connection. Sometimes they are reading your face to understand what happens next. Sometimes they are checking whether the world around them is safe. And sometimes, especially in their later years, they are using you as an anchor in a world that no longer feels as clear as it once did. Different reasons, different situations, different moments. Yet they all point toward the same truth. Your Chihuahua keeps looking at you because you matter. More than the television, more than the window, more than the sounds outside, more than almost anything else in their world. Think about that for a moment. Out of everything competing for their attention, they choose you again, and again. Not because they have to, because they want to. Many owners spend years wondering, what their Chihuahua is thinking when those eyes lock onto them. Perhaps the better question is this: what would happen if those eyes stopped looking for you? One day, the hallway will be quiet. One day, no tiny paws will follow behind you. One day, you may sit in your favorite chair and instinctively glance across the room, expecting to see those familiar eyes watching. And they won't be there. That realization is what transforms an ordinary behavior into something extraordinary. Because the moments we take for granted today often become the moments we miss the most tomorrow. The stare, the waiting, the following, the quiet companionship, the constant desire to know where you are. These are not accidents. They are evidence of a relationship built over thousands of ordinary days, thousands of shared routines, thousands of moments when your Chihuahua learned that you were their source of comfort, their source of safety, their source of belonging. According to the RSPCA and modern canine behavioral sciences, dogs communicate continuously through body language, proximity, eye contact, and social referencing. But perhaps the deepest message hidden inside all those behaviors is this: I trust you. Not because you are perfect, not because you never make mistakes, but because in their eyes, you are home. And maybe that is the message most owners miss. When your Chihuahua freezes and stares at you, they are not judging you. They are not challenging you. They are not being strange. They are staying connected, checking in, making sure their favorite person is still there, making sure the bond still exists, making sure the world still feels safe. So the next time you look up and catch your Chihuahua staring at you, don't rush to look away. Pause for a moment. Look back. You may be witnessing one of the purest expressions of trust that exists between two different species. A conversation without words, a promise without sound, a small heart reaching across a silent distance to say only one thing: I'm here, and I know you're here too. If your Chihuahua has ever looked at you this way, comment the number 1 below. I'd love to know how long your little companion has been by your side. And if this video helped you understand your Chihuahua in a new way, don't forget to subscribe to Paws Mind. Because every behavior has a story, and every story reveals another piece of the beautiful mind behind those loving eyes. Until next time, take care of your Chihuahua and treasure every silent glance, because what feels ordinary today may someday become one of your most precious memories.